Welcome back to another episode of Java Jargon, powered by Avalon Technologies, your podcast for smart conversations on code, architecture, and AI innovation. I'm your host, Dan Gribble, and today's guest is Mike Wahl, Vice President of Software Engineering, AI, and Research and Technology at Tweddle Group. Mike leads global engineering teams and drives scalable platforms and AI strategies behind mission-critical products like Tracer, Guided Diagnostics, and Unity. He's an AI evangelist, founder of Innovation Points, and a builder of cloud-ready systems across healthcare, automotive, and manufacturing. With an MBA, multiple degrees in technology, and certifications in generative AI, prompt engineering, and AWS, Mike brings depth expertise to the table. He's also a published thought leadership on AI agents, strategic velocity, and natural language interfaces. A hands-on strategist who builds centers of excellence and delivers real business impact. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm looking forward to it.
So, Mike, I'll kick this off. So, what first drew you into software engineering and AI?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So I would be one of those kids that, I'm sure you've heard this often, or people say this, but I'm in engineering, one of those kids that took, lots of stuff apart. Most of the time got it back together correctly, but, used to, I think, drive my parents crazy, taking TVs, radios, like just stuff around the house apart to see how it works, and then put it back together and, kind of learn something from it. So, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
I remember you telling me a story about a car you got that didn't have CarPlay, and I think you installed it yourself, correctly?
That's
correct.
Right.
Yeah.
You want me to share that story?
Please. Yeah, why not?
So I don't own this vehicle any longer. I think this was like a 2016 or 2017 F-150. And so I remember going to the dealership, taking a delivery on this truck and plugging in my iPhone, and the screen, like there was no CarPlay on the screen. It just had that kind of, generic, ugly, I don't know, gray screen. And so that bothered me. And I'm asking the salesperson, they're like, this is just the way it is. And I'm like, no, it should have CarPlay. So that bothered me. And so I took ownership and delivery of that truck, and I got it home. And later that week, I'm like, I'm not accepting this. This can't be right. And so I went online and I Google searched, and I came across this forum, and basically somebody had said, hey, there's this USB hub that's in the dashboard of the vehicle. And on the, I can't remember what Lincoln vehicle, but if you buy this USB hub, it was like a $50 part, swap it out and put it in, it will solve your CarPlay or your iPhone issue. So sure enough, I go and order this thing. I wait a couple days, it comes in the mail, and I plug it in, and I plug my phone in, and there it is. There's my CarPlay finally. I'm like, see, it's like all I had to do was swap out this USB hub, and yeah, I had my CarPlay.
That's great.
That's probably way too long of a story, but
Oh.
I was very happy.
Honestly, when I travel, my first question when I run in car, does it have CarPlay or Android Play? Because I don't even want a car without. We're spoiled at this point.
100%.
Absolutely. Well, that's pretty funny. I mean, it seems like you've got a very creative engineering mind when it comes to automotive. We understand that you've also worked in healthcare and manufacturing. What are some of those common trends that you've noticed in how these industries are really adopting, creative ways of, utilizing technology or adopting AI itself?
So I think one of the trends that's very common, so whether it's in automotive or it's healthcare or manufacturing, is that we have data that's in formats or data that's in structures and, things that aren't in the most cleanest or usable state, or they're locked and kind of behind, or they're siloed in different systems, and things are, communicating and connecting the way that we need them to get maximum value out of. And so that's something that I see pretty often, and maybe we'll get to that later when we get to the AI conversation a little bit too. But yeah, definitely one of those kind of common threads or trends for sure.
Awesome. How about this, Mike? Prompt engineering is a topic we've been hearing a lot about. What lessons have you learned from applying it into real world systems?
So I think what I see, and this is like both personally and I think within our engineering teams, is people are focused a lot on the actual prompt itself. And so writing the prompt, and I think there's value in that for sure. But more importantly is there has to be structure in those prompts. And I don't have the exact specifics, but the way that I think about, and I'm struggling to remember the kind of acronym, but essentially what we're looking for is we need to be specific in the prompt and, sort of here's what my goal is. Here's what I'm trying to do. Bring some real world context and like real world data. Because when we don't do that and we don't root or kind of foundationally bring that into the prompt, we're leaving it up to the AI models or the whatever it is that you're using to sort of predict and figure that out. And in other words, or said differently, is, well, that's a hallucination. And so that causes people, I think, a lot of frustration, and this doesn't work. And it's like, well, what does the prompt look like, or how is the prompt structured? And not all the time, but more often than not, there's something where it's like, I wasn't specific enough, I didn't bring the context, or I didn't say, here, I want you to act as like this sort of a role or this sort of a person. You left it up to it predict what it thought that you meant, or what it thought was the next thing, kind of in its cycle. And so when we do that and we leave a lot of, areas or gaps for interpretation, we just get stuff that's like, yeah, it's okay, but that wasn't quite what I was looking for, right? Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
No, honestly,
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah, you hear a lot about those data hallucinations and how customers are actually interacting with the data that they're getting from their environment. So that makes a lot of sense to us for sure. We are having conversations about it all the time.
So, Mike, you've written about strategic velocity. How do you define it, and why is it critical for organizations adopting AI?
Yeah, so I think about it like this. When we think about strategic velocity, we're not talking about how do I, within Jira, close issues, or within, help desk tickets, like how am I closing those things, faster? But we're thinking about what am I doing within the organization that's going to move us forward, and that's going to be something that I can measure, and that I can say, okay, we're making an impact, either top or bottom line, or sort of things like that.
Okay, I do have a follow-up to that. This one may be a little bit more complicated. When looking at some of the organizations out there, public, small institutions, large institutions, medium-sized corporations, large corporations, when do you say buy before you build, or build before you buy? Meaning there's a lot of AI startups that have all these offerings out there. What's that line where you say, let's try buying it, a SaaS application that will do this for us, versus building internal?
So I think if I can buy something versus building it, there isn't something that is is unique as a value, right? And so I can just go buy it because there isn't something I'm trying to plug into internally,
Okay.
right? I'm trying to think of an example of what I could tie that to. I'm kind of blanking on one right now. Maybe we can come back to that one.
Yeah. Give you some time to think about.
Okay.
Yeah, I totally understand. Like, I'm sure there's a million different examples that you try to work through or figure out, in terms of, how you guys are helping customers, really drive those measurable outcomes. In what capacity does building out a center of excellence have to do with how you guys are ensuring that those customers are able to achieve those outcomes and how you guys are measuring them?
Yeah, so on those, and I thought the question was going to be a little bit different, but so when I think about like the center of excellence, we think about that, or I think about that as, sort of special ops, small teams, and sort of like I've heard about some organizations where they've got this center of excellence, which is everybody in the organization is doing something with AI or in some way contributing by using AI. And then there's another side of organizations where it's like we have a small senior or kind of executive level team or group, and they're focused on the center of excellence, or they're focused on projects or work that they're doing that we can measure, by the way, but that's making some sort of a positive impact. Versus, hey, everybody's just, trying to do something to, provide value. Right? Does that make sense? Or
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Absolutely. I think a lot of organizations are certainly focused on being able to use those measurables to determine, whether some of those initiatives are, accurate or make sense to them and are really driving revenue. Because at the end of the day, that's what a lot of organizations are focused on, right? Is, how are they determining the success of these projects? And a lot of that is based on the monetary value that it can provide at the end of the day. So, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I would also say from higher education, it's about developing students, positive outcomes, graduation rates. Like, how do you leverage technology to better set up your students long term? How does the AI help impact that, right? So Mike, where do you see AI agents making the biggest impact in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, so this is, for me, this is kind of the boring stuff. So this isn't the emerging technology this is the, kind of automate the boring stuff. This is the, we think about kind of workflows, or I think about processes within an organization. Either a department or a person, they take data from here and this system, and it goes over into this system, or kind of the copying and pasting, if you will, sort of thing. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity to automate that sort of stuff, where there are jobs to be done and things that we need to create output or to create deliverables, but there are things that are really ripe for automation. And those that know me, or we have these conversations, I do get a little bit wound up about machine learning versus AI versus automation, because they are three discrete different things. And the automation for me kind of tied to the agent question that you're asking.
Okay.
There's a lot of opportunity for us to kind of automate the boring.
Right. Makes sense.
So Mike, I have a sort of a leadership question for you based on your role, but if you could, a new developer, what kind of advice would you give developers entering the AI space today?
That is such a good question. We could spend so much time in this space, or in this on this area too. But so a couple things I would say is, one, that it's really important, I think, that our engineers or software engineers spend time making good decisions and like really think about what it is that we're creating or why we're doing something, versus just like, oh, I wrote really good code. Why did we write the code? Like, oh, well, because we had this feature, or because we had this request, or because we had this enhancement. And the other part is like I see this a lot, or we see this a lot in the AI assisted tooling, is a lot of delegating, which is good, but you don't want to delegate the decision or the kind of thinking or the architecture. Like, those are yours as an engineer to defend and to be creative and to create. And I think what happens is, and we see this, or you kind of read about it now, is we see engineers that when we don't really understand what it is that we're creating and we delegate things down to the AI agent or the tooling, you can't really explain the code that you've got running or that you've got deployed. And it's dangerous for a whole bunch of reasons. But I think what I would say is the message or the advice is, really make sure that you understand the code that you are creating. And two is like, don't rob yourself and don't take that opportunity, to really learn from a lot of those experiences. Like, there's so many things, like when we're writing software, you're creating solutions or things, it's an iterative process, and it's full of, lessons learned, and it's full of, hey, I went down this path. Well, this path wasn't the right one, but it was kind of like close. And then we, stumble on something else. And, finally you get to a point where you're like, that's it. This is what I, am looking for. And this is what I'm trying to deliver. Said differently, that's the value. It's not just the activity, but like, that's the value that we're going after to deliver. There's so many other things too that I'm a little bit on the spot, but I mean, we could spend so much time, I think, in that space, especially when people are new. For sure.
I'm glad you're having those conversations when you're talking with those guys, right? Because you're right. It could be, it could be a sinkhole almost in terms of, the way these guys go through it.
Yeah. Well, and one more thing too, Rob, I would say is there's a mindset shift, right? And I think this comes later, but our more junior or early engineers and developers, they're purely like I use the word activity, but it's more an implementation focus. And as we move up to kind of senior or the principal level, those are more value focused. But that takes time. That's not something that like, hey, overnight or kind of early in your career. That takes time to develop with that. For sure, that mindset.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So, Mike, I want to change gears here for a minute. We've been talking about code and developers and, strategic thought process. Here at Java Jargon, we like to mix things up, right? So here's a funny, just fun question for you. I think Todd had mentioned beginning at this, we like to have fun here. So what's your go-to coffee order when you're deep in problem-solving mode?
Okay, so I've been to Italy. I've had really good coffee, and so I'm not a Starbucks person. I'm actually, I guess we would classify me as like more of a coffee snob. I love it. But I think one of the things that I don't really order coffee like as often. What I do is, years ago, I was introduced to an espresso machine. And now, like, I tell my wife, I'm like, I'm literally stuck on a machine or these cartridges or whichever. And the thing I like about it is it's a machine. It's very consistent. It's like you put the cartridge in. It's a little bit nicer than a Keurig, and the quality is a little bit nicer. But essentially, everything that I'm expecting from this machine is exactly the same. Like every single time, it's very consistent. I don't like sugar in my coffee, so I'm a little bit simple of a guy, like, in that respect. It's like, here it's espresso and a little bit of milk, but the coffee itself is very consistent.
There's automation in our coffee makers now, right?
That's right. That's what. Yeah. It's not an Internet of Things, but
Yeah, there's the consistency there. Yeah, my wife just actually got us one, and it's been pretty remarkable. I'm an espresso guy myself, so that's
I
fantastic.
think there's people that either like them or they don't. But like I'm saying, it's not a Keurig.
Yeah.
I think the quality is a little bit better, but
Oh yeah, for sure.
And my wife was really thoughtful. She got me one 2 years ago for Christmas, and every once in a while she lets me use it too, which is really nice.
that's nice.
So nice.
But it's you know, you have to like tap now. You're grounding it, you're tapping it in. You're not everything's consistent, and you have to mess with the settings on it. She seems to have it mastered for the way she likes it. I'm not allowed to touch it, so I take it the way she makes it.
There you go.
All right, Mike, last question.
Yeah.
What's the one jargon you would retire from tech conversations if you could?
Oh my gosh.
Loaded, right?
Have to be
Whatever you want.
All right, so I would probably go with retiring future proofing
Mike.
as the jargon. So essentially, like, I say that because in over 20 years of technology, I've never really seen it work. Right? So we future proof in systems or in design, right? Because it's like inevitably I'm gonna need to build this thing, or I'm gonna need to prepare or plan for, right? But it just never really works out that way, or at least in my experience, unless somebody feels differently about that. But I would say, though, I'm saying replace it or get rid of it. I guess I'm saying get rid of it. I would replace it with, I'd like to see that go away and have something more, whether it's adaptable or flexible, because I think that's a better representation than saying something's future proof.
Yeah.
Have you heard that before, or is that new?
There's several OEMs use it in their marketing literature. Pretty consistent that they're future proofing, and they've been working on it for 20 years now.
Yeah. Well, I think any other comments and thoughts from you, Mike?
Do you want to go back to? I mean, we don't have to, but do we want to go back to? I forget which question it was.
Build or buy. Build or buy. Yeah. We meet with a lot of customers, and we have our own insight, but I would love to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah, so the build versus buy. So I just had a little bit more time to kind of think about that. I think there's absolutely places where today we buy things off the shelf. I think there's things that we do that both from a software engineering and from an AI perspective, where I'm not going to go and create an AI LLM or an AI model like that. That's nonsense today. There's too many that are open source or that are commercial that are good enough that we would just buy and consume that as a service, versus me trying to go and build or train an AI model. I think about that from a software platform perspective too. I think there's a lot of things that are available that we can buy, off the shelf that are, like, I'm an 80-20 person. If 80% of that functionality I can get in off the shelf solution or software, we'll probably leverage as much of that as I can. And then I've got 20% of it that we've got to develop or we've got to build. But especially today with all the advancements in AI assistance and or the building and things like that, I don't see us, or I don't know, I don't see that building versus buying as what we would be doing like more often than, than the other. Does that make sense? I don't know.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Is that what you guys hear or see, or?
Well, for us, there's a lot of variables to it. One, do they have the talent in-house to build, right? That's one of the critical pieces, the biggest variable, because there's a lot to it. Do you have the developers? Do you have the data organized? Do you have people that know how to organize the data? So that's kind of step one. Step two is the actual infrastructure itself, right? If you're building out, depending what type of application and workloads you're looking at, the cost associated with just the back-end hardware may be more significant than what they're expecting to begin with. Again, it depends what kind of outcome and the ROI they're putting behind it. So we have to do a cost profit analysis or cost benefit analysis when looking at it from that perspective. And then it's billed internally or it's billed externally into a cloud, and what your operations cost is going to be impacted by doing so. And then it's all about the data, right? Where is that data residing? Is it IP data that you're very protective over? So there's really three variables we go through and assess when looking at build first fact.
Yeah, makes sense.
Did we come from you? I mean,
Me. I appreciate that.
Did we touch on the AI velocity enough, or do we want to go back and talk about that?
I would love to touch more on it if you have time.
Yeah, let's do it.
absolutely.
What was the question on that one again?
So it was, go ahead, Todd.
No, go ahead, Dan.
So the question was, so you've written about strategic velocity. How do you define it, and why is it critical for organizations that are adopting AI?
Yes, I would define that strategic velocity as how fast can I turn those aligned priorities, I guess a business or as an organization, into real impact, real value. And thinking about, moving from an idea to then we've got to make a decision to now, I've got to put something into production, or I have to deliver something. And ultimately, it comes back to we have to move, or we have to move a metric. We have to influence or make some sort of an impact. And I think I spend more time around this in AI, which I think is, really relevant today because it's moving so quickly. And the value that we get out of it comes from all of these rapid cycles, which today it's here, I need to be able to go from idea to prototype to put something in front of the customer or, a stakeholder and get their feedback, right? Is this good? Is there something missing? That whole process, when I think about, kind of prior, even years ago, we're not talking about decades ago, but years ago, that's weeks and months of work is now hours or days of there's an idea to now, I need to put something, out. And so I've got, hours or days to do that.
Sense.
Yeah, and I think the challenge is setting the right expectations with executive leadership.
Yep.
And the developers, right? There has to be that communication piece on here is the outcome we're looking for, but realistically, this is what it's going to take to get there. Because that's one of the challenges right now, right? The communication between the two groups. And there's usually a lot more groups involved.
Totally. And I think if an organization or their strategic velocity is low, then we have I'm going to go back to AI for a second. It turns into a bunch of slide presentations, or it turns into the MIT study, which is, 95% of those pilots are just pilots. Like there is no things they're not in production. Only 5% of those 95% of things actually became real, right? But that's if the strategic velocity is low. So if it's not, totally different story, totally different outcome.
Well said.
Absolutely. Well, that's a wrap on this episode of Java Jargon powered by Avalon Technology. A huge thank you to Mike Wahl for sharing his insights on AI strategy, strategic velocity, and the future of engineering leadership. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with your network. For more discussions at intersections of code, architecture, and innovation, follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, keep coding, keep questioning, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Thanks again, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Appreciate you.